Alright, doing a new video. So, I was watching, who was it? There's a music reviewer I watch regularly, and he was doing that album by that guy who's from that band called Black Midi that no longer exists because they broke up. Jordy Greep is the name of the guitar player, I guess. And he made an album that's about basically the incel type. So, um, anyway, this music reviewer listened to this one song and he did his little review, and I thought I'd read about this album before, and so I thought, well, let's see what other people have to say about it. Let's see what the analysis on this Jordy Grief album is. There was one dude who was like there's a guy who I guess is pretty popular on YouTube, Professor Sky, I think his name is, who did a video sort of analyzing the whole idea behind the the Jordy Group, you know, personality type, um, and talking about how this guy said at one point he was like an incel when he was young, but eventually he got over that, and he wasn't. He just said, "Oh well, all it took for me to get over that was therapy. I had to go to therapy." Okay. So for that guy, therapy was the answer. Now, that maybe that guy, you know, getting therapy, it's not cheap. It takes a long time to find the right therapist, and sometimes you can waste a lot of time, with the wrong therapist. I stopped going to the therapist that I was going to because I felt like they were just sitting there and letting me um, talk, and it didn't feel like there was any kind of like, you know, analysis going on or any real, like, it was just sort of like I felt like I was just paying to come in and sit and talk about my week, and there wasn't really a lot of, I felt like, you know, it didn't seem like, there was any methodology being employed. Just feel like, well, I could just tell anybody this, I could sit around and tell somebody how my week went regardless. Also, the therapist I went to was an older woman, and I didn't want to be insulting and tell her about, the fact I didn't find older women particularly attractive, you know. So I felt like I couldn't be honest with her. And I know that's important with a therapist. You got to find somebody who you can be completely honest with. So anyway, I stopped going. Sadly, my health insurance is taken by very few therapists around here. It took me forever to find this one therapist. I must have contacted like 100 therapists or something like that. I got one who would take my insurance. Which is a crappy insurance because I want the cheapest insurance possible because I'm you know, not making any kind of serious money. Even when I had a job, I wasn't making any kind of serious money. I'm paying $60 a month now for therapy, or sorry, for health insurance. I probably could get on Medicare again, but if I was on Medicare, you also don't get good health care coverage, on Medicare. So basically, nobody wants to pay for mental health in this country for people that need it, for poor people that need it. So, you know, so saying that, oh, you just incels should just get therapy. Well, that's a gross oversimplification. It's not that simple. It's not, most people don't have access to that therapy. I could have my parents pay for therapy for me, but they're retired. I don't want them spending their money on my therapy, and you know, I don't want to go through the years it would take to find the right therapist or whatever. I don't want to pay a bunch of money to a therapist. It's expensive. Therapy's expensive. So first there's that. If I were to find a therapist, I'd want them to use some kind of methodology and not just talk to me. But anyway, so you know, this guy basically said, well, the way he fixed it was therapy. And what did he say? Forming meaningful relationships with women. That was another thing he said. Now I have had meaningful relationships with women, not a lot. I haven't had a lot of meaningful relationships with people outside of my family. I have a lot of There's a lot of women in my family that I've have relationships with. I don't hate women like other incels do. Um, you know, generally, I'm an old school feminist. I think the new school of feminism is misguided in a lot of ways. But old school feminist says, women should be given the right to do everything that men do. I agree with that. I don't believe that women are deficient in any way. That there are things. Maybe there's some people that think that we have different skills. I'm not even sure if that's true. Seems like I watched a video recently that's saying that all the people that are claiming that women don't like science as much or don't have the same skills or are not very well don't take from a very large sample size and haven't been confirmed enough times to really be reliable. So I've known some women that are or if I've been not known, but I've been around some women in my life that were clearly very intelligent and could do some very advanced thinking. In my math classes, some of the girls were just as smart as some of the guys. And there's a girl on YouTube who's kind of she's I think an astrophysicist or something like that. And she obviously knows well more than I think I could ever hope to know about math and physics. So, you know, I think there's this idea like all incels. I'm not really an incel. I'm a mental cell. I've talked about this before. There's this idea that that people like me hate women, and I think the modern day feminism. I'm not going to go into detail on the problems with the modern day feminism, but I believe in feminism classic. Women should be able to do any job that men can do. I think as long as women are doing the same job, they deserve to be paid the same amount that the men are being paid. I don't think there's anything wrong with women being leaders. I voted for Kamala. You know, so I don't hate women. There's some things I don't like about modern feminism. But like I said, I'm not going to go into detail on that. So anyway, um, so I sort of said, well, if it's not, it's like what aside from getting therapy, which as I said is difficult, and meaningful relationships with women. This guy suggested, well, I have a lot of meaningful relationships with women. My niece loves me. She loves me, a ton. My niece, they're raising my niece to be a super little mini mega feminist. And I don't have a problem with her being a feminist, but I worry that she's going to adopt some of the nouveau feminism, and not just stick to there's this sort of, I think there's this like desire for women to get back at men for the years of patriarchy, so they want to have this kind of, you know, girls rule, boys drool type of thing. They want to kind of, not make it equal, but sort of put women in this sort of superior position now, sort of as a way to get back. As I've said before, I don't think that's, you know, stooping to the same levels that you're of the people you're trying to fight back against. You're gonna have the matriarchy now because of the patriarchy. It's like it's not it doesn't say good things about you that if you want to do the same evil deeds that the other side did to you. It should be about equality. So but anyway, I don't think we'll see what happens. My niece is, I think she'll grow up to be reasonable. I think, there's a lot of joking around with as far as, the matriarchy type of thinking. I think it's more of a joke than, in reality, I think women just want equality, and that's reasonable. But, um, yeah. So when they talk about, having strong relationships with women. I have one really good woman friend. I don't have a lot of friends in general. I have people that are kind of friend adjacent. They're almost friends. There's some people in my trivia group I see every week, and they're a good group of guys. Maybe I could be friends with them if there's only one of them I've hung out with outside of trivia. I've gone to see some movies with them. Um, but I don't know. I haven't had a lot of. I've had one female friend for most of my life, and she's been having major health issues. I haven't really been there for her, and I feel like in some ways I've been a terrible friend to her. But it's because she's been having such terrible health issues that she's just always in this coming from this position of need. can only give so much. I'm not the most selfless person in the world. So it has nothing to do with her being a woman. I don't like to hang around people that require too much from me in general. You know. So anyway, part of the reason why I'm um, a bit, you know, avoidant of relationships maybe is because the amount you do have to give for a relationship. I don't actively pursue it because I know, how much sacrifice it likely requires, from seeing other people. You get a lot out of it, but you have to give a lot. And I'm not the most naturally giving person in the world. I try to be empathetic, but I try to be generous when I can. I don't think I'm not, I don't, I'm not that selfish, but I'm also not super giving, so maybe I'm somewhat selfish. But anyway, so yeah, so his advice, the therapy part. All right, yeah, sure, the therapy, his advice to getting over your inceldom or getting over those feelings of inadequacy. The therapy part certainly could help if you found the right therapist, but like I said, it's not super practical and not super easy for most people to get into that environment. And and the meaningful relationships with women. I think I have plenty of meaningful relationships with women, and as a percentage of the people I know, well, I mean, a lot of them are family members, but I have a pretty good relationship with all of the girls in my family. I don't think there's anything deficient in my relationships with the women in my family, and my friend, if there isn't anything deficient, it has nothing to do with the fact that she was a woman. So, um, so I went and found another video. I wrote, I think I searched in YouTube, like, what should incels do, otherwise, And I think I was looking through there was a video from Vice that they sort of documented this one kid as an incel. I don't even know how old it is. It might be kind of an old video now for all I know. Because it was kind of like there was a point at which people didn't know incels that well, and so they were doing this. I made a video about incels a number of years ago, and that was about the time I think that people were like, fascinated. What is this incel creature? Let's go in and take a look at him in his natural environment. And so there's this one guy they feature in the video who, takes part in these incel chat rooms, which I don't do, or the red pill stuff and the manosphere and all that kind of stuff. Maybe at times I've occasionally watched a video or two, but not commonly because I know that it's just, I know it's kind of like an echo chamber for anger and insecurity and stuff like that. So I try to stay away from it as much as I can. Every now and again, something will come into my feed. I don't know. I don't watch those videos mostly. I'm not that interested in that. I know that it's really just men lying to themselves to try to feel better about their place in life. For the most part, we are in the positions we're in. I wouldn't say because of our own actions, but you know, because of a combination of our own actions and the situation that life has put us in. There's this idea, like I said, it's always both. People like to go one way or the other on this. They always like to say, well, you are who you are because of the decisions you've made. That's the one side. And the other side is, you are who you are because of the situation you were placed in. I mean, there's this one guy out there who claims to, be a scientist of some sort. I don't know, and he's under the impression that most of what we are is not dictated by what we do, but rather where we came from. And I think a lot of it is where you came from, but certainly what we do is. But the thing is that what you do is in a lot of ways influenced by where you came from, and who's around you, and things that have influenced you. So it's not wrong to say that your decisions, that your decisions lead you to where you go. But a lot of the decisions that you make because of your circumstances. I think this is something people have a hard time understanding. And maybe you can change. Maybe you can. Maybe you can recognize the unhealthy patterns and do something about them, but it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. I think your brain gets programmed into certain patterns and ways of thinking, and it's very difficult to break out of those patterns. And it does maybe take therapy, which again, like I said, not super affordable, you know, and hard to um, hard to get anyone else to pay for it. So anyway, that's not to say that you shouldn't try to break out of those patterns of thinking, but let me just in the end, I was reading through the comments of this video where they were sort of detailing, profiling this one incel. And I think I came to a pretty good comment that I think sums up the situation pretty well. I'm going to read that comment and then I'll make a comment on that. So here we go. This guy said, so they're talking about the incel in the video. And this guy says, because the guy in the video who's the incel. He's not a terrible looking guy. He's not conventionally attractive, but he probably could be better looking if he cleaned himself up a little bit. Did the whole, went to the gym, the whole, and dressed spiffy and all that. But this guy says his looks don't matter to women. His problem is that his life is going nowhere. Now, first of all, his looks do matter to women. So for him to say that his looks don't matter at all, well, it's not that they don't matter. It's just that they're not the deciding factor on what makes him an incel. I believe what this guy is saying. Um, looks do matter. They're not everything, but they are one of the factors by which, the opposite sex judges you, regardless of whether you're man or woman. But anyway, this guy, so he starts. I don't disagree with that first statement. They matter. That's not everything. That's what he's trying to say. His problem is that his life is going nowhere. Even if he left the house, he would not get a woman because he has nothing of value to offer. I'll read the whole thing first, and then I'll go back and comment. So even if he left the house, he would not get a woman because he has nothing of value to offer her. Women don't choose men on looks alone. Looks are a small part. Women choose men for their ability and potential to take care of them and a family. This man is not in a position to do this. Why? Because he is consuming hatred. Or because he is consumed hatred. I don't know. Because he has consumed hatred. It's not written properly. He probably has been rejected before, maybe many times. It is true women participate in hypergamy, trying to level up, and are chasing the rich, quote-unquote, chads. This is incel talk. Just as men chase the beautiful, over-sexualized Stacy's. What happens? Average or below average men don't find Stacy because she has better options and won't choose him. Stacy, again, if you don't know, is like the girls that everyone or that most guys agree are on the upper end of the attractiveness spectrum. Chads are most of the guys that most of the women agree are on the upper end of the attractiveness / social status spectrum. All right, let's get that out of the way. So what happens? Average or below average men don't find Stacy because she has better options and won't choose him. He gets bitter and thinks all women are terrible instead of just understanding that beautiful Stacy is playing the field because she can, and that he could choose plain Jane and still be happy. Women, and he writes in parentheses, where have all the good men gone? Don't find Chad, tall, high, income, committed to her, because Chad can have any woman he wants. Feminism has taught women that they can have it all, be promiscuous like men, and chase Chad and never settle for anything less. She could understand that Chad only exists on Instagram, and that most men aren't tall enough, don't make over six figures, and that she's not as good looking as she thinks, and maybe should find a nice man she finds agreeable who will be willing to treat her with respect and build a life with. Society ends up with bitter men like this guy, who is correct to a certain degree about Chad and Stacy and about his circumstances. He could change it by investing in himself, getting a job, and having something of value to offer a woman, than going out and trying again with women. You also end up with bitter, alone women who sleep around, have children out of wedlock, and chase men till they hit the wall, quote unquote, and are no longer as desirable to men on the sexual marketplace. They wonder why they can't find anyone. Well, the quote unquote good men who had something to offer are already taken. They got married earlier and have already started their families. The men left over are either high value men who can keep their options open and who women are perpetually throwing themselves at, a small percentage of the male population, or who are men, women won't quote unquote settle for. It's not working out well for anyone. Both sexes end up not getting what they desire. Why? Unrealistic expectations and unwilling to quote unquote settle and commit to the hard work of building a real life together. Not an Instagram life that is fake and doesn't exist. Okay, so let's go over this. The problem that his life is going nowhere. I agree with that. I think most of the time, like for my example, my life isn't really going anywhere. You know, even if he left the house, he would not get a woman because he has nothing valuable to offer. This is the reason why. You know, I don't know if you saw it. I did make a video about a girl that seemed to interest me in my art club at one point. And she definitely was interested in me at one point, but I've been skipping the art club a lot. And I only go occasionally. I like the art club. I am planning on going back eventually. But, you know, dealing with that woman makes me nervous because if she does like me, I don't really want to start a relationship with her because she can do better than me. That's the reality. Um, I don't have a job. I live with my folks. I mean, saying she could do better. I mean that you know that by society's standards anyway, she could do better. She's an attractive girl, and she probably doesn't want unless she's a savior type, which also is unhealthy. She doesn't want to be with a guy in my situation at my age. You know, in all likelihood, the savior types are ones. As you know, there's some people that think they can save somebody else. I like that idea, but from what I hear, from what I've read, that's not a psychologically healthy way to approach a relationship, and really puts too much burden on one person to, um, you know. I think usually what happens in those situations is they try to fix the person, refuses the help, and in the end they just end up getting frustrated and leaving the person, and the person ends up feeling, it's just usually it's not a recipe for success in relationships is to have somebody try to be a savior of somebody else. So I'm avoiding. I could have tried to start something with this girl, but I'm thinking I don't really have anything to offer to her. So in all likelihood, unless she really just liked my personality that much that she was willing to accept me for who I am, and maybe eventually I'll want to do something with my life. But as it stands now, I don't. Until I do, I can't see exposing my situation to anybody. You know, I don't expect even if I were to get any kind of, you know, interest from a woman early on, it would evaporate fairly quickly. Once they see that I'm pretty much unwilling to change. So I feel like, well, you know, I've got to probably at least have a job minimum before I can expect any kind of reciprocal attraction. Maybe probably not just a job, but a job in my own place. I feel like that's the minimum. But anyway, so yeah. And I didn't even leave the house and go to the art group because of my own decision. My female friend, asked me if I wanted to go many months back, and maybe it was about a year back or so. Maybe it was a year and a half. I don't know, something like that. Maybe it was a year. And that's how I started going in the first place. I didn't even like art. I'm not a big fan of drawing, but since I've been going, I don't know. I still don't like it. It's not like I dislike it. Sometimes I like it, but this goes into the whole, the reason why I don't like to do things. I'm not that good at art. I'm okay. There's people that are worse. Um, you know, I like to do things that I'm good at. I don't have a natural talent for art. You know, it's not really since I've been going to the art club. It's really like, okay, I don't suck. I'm not as bad as I thought I was. I suppose you could say. But as far as talent, I see what other people are doing at this art club. Some of these people really have skills. Maybe they've been doing it for years and they developed it, but I don't know. I guess in some ways it feels like a chore. Making these pictures. It's like I don't know how much joy I really get out of it. You know, I don't really, I don't really revel in the process of getting better at drawing things. Mostly, I like to do abstract stuff because it doesn't require that I improve. I can do something that's just shapes and colors and and it's still pleasing to my eye. So I'll do that sometimes, but it's not something I live for. I much prefer music, making music or jamming. And making art. Making art is sort of in the moment, but I feel like making music is, I don't know, it's more instinctual for me than making art. I don't feel like I have great instincts when it comes to making visual art. But anyway, so that was the reason why I started going, was with my friend, and you know, I don't know. I go about as often as I'm really interested in going, particularly. For a while I was going just because I liked seeing her. It was somewhat, yeah. I've been trying not to say I say a lot. Here, right there. It's hard. It is like it's like a nervous tick I have. Anyway, so yeah, it was the excitement of having someone interested in me for a while was making it worth going to some extent. But I really thought about, as the more I think about the long-term implications of, what a relationship would mean, it just makes it seem as if I'm wasting my time, kind of. I'll still keep going because I don't mind. It's a social opportunity. I don't get a lot of social opportunities particularly, and I don't mind drawing things. I just don't live for it. Anyway, so where was I? I just went off on a tangent there. So yeah, even if you left the house, you would not get a woman because there's nothing of value to offer. Women don't choose men on looks alone. Looks are a small part. Women choose men for their ability and potential to take care of them in a family. Now, this is not all women. Now, this is a bit of a blanket statement. Not all women are interested in men just for their ability to take care of a family. A lot of women don't want families. I know a lot of women that don't want families. So that's, take care of them though. Well, take care of them. That's definitely a little reductive. I'd say a man to share their life with. That's what women want. But when you have a woman who wants a man to share her life with, she doesn't want to feel like she's, making sacrifices or has to compromise her lifestyle in order to accommodate the man. They're usually looking for someone who's likes to do the same thing they want to do, can generally afford to do those things, and isn't going to drag them down with negativity or other things like that. Some women are looking for a man that can help raise a family. That's certainly another contingent of women, but it's not all women. So, but generally, I think there is a biological need in women to be with a guy, whether or not they consciously acknowledge it or consciously want to start and raise a family. There is still some need to be with somebody who's not a loser, not somebody who has nothing going on, who doesn't have any aspirations. It is people that are passionate about things are more attractive than people who are apathetic and don't know what they're doing with their lives. So you can't blame women for that. I understand that mindset. Um, let's see. So he says the guy the incel in this video is not in position to, he said women choose men for their ability and potential to take care of them and a family. So I think that for those women that aren't particularly interested in raising a family, ability covers some of the other stuff. If a guy, we want to be with people who are they feel special in some way or another. So ability is part of that. I mean, it may not necessarily be ability; it might also be personality. But anyway, so he says this man is not in a position to do this. Why? Because he is consuming hatred. Yes, he is consuming hatred. I agree. He's probably been rejected before, maybe many times. Now, I've been rejected before. I wouldn't say many times, but a few. I think mostly the rejection I've dealt with has been um, sort of the relationship not going the way I had wanted it to, or not feeling like they were interested in the same things that I was interested in, or them wanting to take it too fast and me wanting something that was a little more traditional. So that's not to say that I haven't been in any relationship, so, but I don't know. I've been rejected outright. Probably, I don't know. In my mind, I've been rejected outright at least 2 or 3 times. And usually it's because it's not. Yeah, it's usually because um, you know, I'm not aggressive enough. It's not so much that I'm rejected because I am aggressive and they say no. It's because I wasn't aggressive enough. That, and in the end, they feel like I'm not worth their time if I'm, or they assume that I'm not interested. Either they assume I'm not interested or I'm not manly enough to make a move, and they have a problem with that. All right. And then I don't want to say manly enough because it could just be that I don't want to, I'm not chauvinistic enough to want to, if you want to put it in a nicer way. I'm not chauvinistic enough to want to sleep with them and move on. I'm trying to develop a real relationship. But you can read that different ways. So, yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, I had some. There's some part of me that's, I guess, a little resentful that women, over haven't found my personal character particularly attractive. Um, but I wouldn't say I'm as resentful as some of these incel types. This guy says true women participate in hypergamy, trying to level up and are chasing the rich Chads just as the men chase the beautiful, over-sexualized Stacy's. Now, this is a generalization. Not all women are going after the top of the top, but generally, women are attracted to guys who are better looking and have higher social status, for either because of money or because of, social ability or something in that way. And men are certainly more attracted to the most beautiful women. We're very visual. We're pretty shallow. If you're good looking, we like you. Sometimes, I'm probably deeper than most men in that I don't want to date bimbos particularly. I am looking for somebody who I can have some kind of intellectual connection with. But, it's not, looks still kind of top our list of, um, of needs in a relationship. So anyway, what happens? Average or below average men don't find the best looking girls because she has better options and won't choose them. Now, this is true, None of the girls that I really had a thing for, you know, needed me. If they weren't interested in anything, it was in a fling. They weren't really interested in getting to know me. Um, I was too average for most girls, or maybe I just lacked confidence. And so I wasn't naturally attractive to them. So generally, I never had too many girls that I would consider to be that I was particularly attracted to that showed a lot of interest in me. They might have shown some. There's been some girls that showed some interest, but it wasn't so much that they were willing to persist um, you know, after things didn't happen quickly. So let's see. So then he says it gets bitter and thinks all women are terrible. That's not true, but I there's some resentment. instead of just understanding that beautiful Stacy is playing the field because she can, I do understand that that is why. I think that's why I'm not bitter, is because I know that these women can can find guys that are higher status than me. Um, and she has better options because she has better options and won't choose me, right? Okay. He gets bitter and thinks, "Oh, is playing the field because she can." And so here's the thing, and I could choose plain Jane and still be happy. Now, this is probably one of the major. Um, this is always. I made a video about this, telling people that you shouldn't, tell people who they should be attracted to. Um, this is probably the number one thing that most people would tell incels like me, is that, oh, you got to lower your standards, And this assumes that we're going to get some joy out of a relationship with somebody after our standards have been lowered. Now, I don't think my standards are, you know, I don't think they're um, unrealistically high personally. The way I see it, if you want to have a relationship with someone, they got to be at least a 6, maybe a 5 if you really want to lower your standards. 5 is kind of like, well, you know, this person's almost attractive. I almost want to be with them. I don't have a lot of interest in being with a woman who's sort of a 5, no matter how interested she is in me. A 5, just, and I'm talking about 5 just in terms of what I'm attracted to. Relationships a lot of work, and it's got to be worth it. You got to get something out of it. If I found a 5 who was somebody who was a really someone I thought I could really vibe with, even then I'd probably rather just have them to be a friend than a relationship. Once you get to 6, then you're like, okay, 6 is on the plus side of the scale. Now my 6 may not be another guy's 6. Maybe my 6 is too high on the scale. I don't know, but and in my mind, it's like I can't force myself to be attracted to somebody. Someone has to be at least a 6. I don't think all the girls I've been attracted to over the years were 8s and 9s and 10s. This is what a lot of people are suggesting. There's been some girls who definitely weren't 8, 9s, and 10s, but that I had some amount of attraction to. But generally, I think it's, you know, a big thing is that lack of socialization. Around a lot of girls, period. Let alone those I'm attracted to. Um, you know, most of the girls I worked with when I worked my last job were too young for me. They were just too young. Even though, obviously, if you saw that other video, I was interested in some of them anyway. But yeah, I think it just gets harder to meet women when you get older. I think when I was younger, you know, I wasn't actively social, and I think a large reason why that is this is one of the things I kind of wanted to get to. I'm kind of coming around to it really slowly, but the reason why men don't go out and be social is because they've had something happen, usually, that's made them not adjust well to social interaction. And that for me was, my issue, my genetic defect that gave me I think it was a adrenal gland problem or something like that. Anyway, I'm not going to get into detail, but basically, as a result of that, my body was not ideal, and I got made fun of a lot for it. And I pulled away from people, and this is one of the things I think that people need to understand. They act like, oh well, these people are shutting themselves away from the world, right? They're being antisocial. Well, to do that is a natural reaction when your exposure to being social has ended up in ridicule, or people just being disrespectful. Why would you want to be around people that, why do you want to get to know people if the end result of you knowing them is just that you're disrespected or ridiculed? And part of it is that once you've been disrespected and ridiculed, you sort of develop a victim mentality and you become more negative in general. And so another reason why people disrespect you and maybe ridicule you is because you're more negative in general. But this is something that you've learned from an experience in your past. And so it's hard to now you could say, all right, well, go to therapy so that you get rid of any negative emotions tied to those things. And so you can be more positive around people and, not expect the worst from people, not expect to be ridiculed. But again, and you've got the expensive therapy part of it, number one. And number two, you've got the question of really how much can you get over your trauma, in your life. I think there's this idea like, I think it also depends on the amount of trauma, And I think people who haven't had a lot of trauma or whose traumas were, relatively less intense don't understand the difficulty in getting out from behind very difficult trauma. And so they sort of, blame the incel for, not working on himself. But I just think that they don't understand the Herculean task involved with, becoming more comfortable in social situations and getting your personality to a point where people do respect you, and where, because that's the thing. It's like a lot of this is about feeling disrespected by people, and who wants to go out and be social with people who are disrespectful, you know? That's what it really comes down to. Um, I don't want to meet a lot of new people right now because I know people will be disrespectful of where I am at in my life and my history. And I just wish people could be less judgmental, I suppose. Everyone's very judgmental. And I think that's a large part because of society. This is where I come back to pinning it back on society. We're propagandized to be judgmental against people. The world is propagandized to be judgmental against people like me. And why is that? Because I am seen as a loser because I'm not productive. Because I don't offer things to other people, right? But what do people want in this society? They want things that make you successful in a capitalist enterprise, a capitalist uh, economy, I should say. I don't offer a lot in terms of my assistance to capitalism. Most of my values come from, I suppose, to some extent, my artistry. I'm not super artistic, but I have worked harder on that than anything else. I put a lot of time into. People say you should work on yourself. Well, they don't seem to, Sometimes they say you should play an instrument. I spent a lot of time trying to learn to play an instrument. It doesn't give you a lot of social capital these days. Capitalism doesn't particularly appreciate artists. You know, we don't get paid. Without getting paid, you can develop a skill, and without getting paid for it, these days people sort of make fun of the guy who tries to take the guitar out at the party. We've spent all this time, I'm not that guy because I don't like being the center of attention like that. But we spent, a lot of time trying to learn music, and we're stigmatized for it. Musicians are stigmatized for caring about music because it's seen as naive and it's not seen as a legitimate career. And that's one of the best things not one of the best things I have to offer because it turns out I'm not particularly talented at it. But it's something I put a lot of time and effort into. And they tell you to go, to work on yourself. I did work on myself. I put a lot of years of study into being a musician, and it's not valued in social situations anymore. There was a time when it was, but now it's more of a joke. People groan and roll their eyes when people try to take out instruments and jam. There was a time when people respected you for that, but capitalism doesn't care about art. So, no one cares how much time. No one cares if you put years into, trying to. I didn't master the craft. I wasn't particularly talented, but I put a lot of time into it, more than most things I do. And it's pretty much dismissed. No one really cares, about that time that I took. So, what else do I have to offer? Well, I could be funny, and I'm pretty empathetic. I'm pretty socially aware. Unlike some incels. I'm not. I don't have autism or Asperger's or anything like that. I can talk to people. Um, and I can make people laugh sometimes, every now and again. I can be funny. Not on these videos, like I've said. And every now and again, I might say something funny on these videos. I'm just not trying to be funny. But, you don't get respect for those qualities. I was at work, and I was relatable. I tried to work hard at my job. I did. I put in a lot of effort, and I wouldn't say I got respected for it. I wasn't respected for being a good guy, a nice guy. You know, people like me, but there's a difference between being liked and being respected. And at my job, despite me putting forth my best efforts to be, you know, to work hard, to be a good example, and to connect with people, and to, make people laugh, it doesn't get you respect. You know, and you don't really want to hang out with people that don't respect you. You just don't. So I think that's what most of this video is coming down to. It's like this idea, like, you know, people tell you to work on yourself. What do they mean when they say? A lot of times they insist that incels work on themselves, but they mean that they mostly mean work on yourself in terms of what you can contribute to a capitalist economy. That's what people value. I mean, it could be other things, I suppose. You could, maybe if you did volunteer work, you could tout that, or maybe if you started a club or something like that, you could be seen as an organizer, somebody that provided value in ways that weren't strictly capitalistic. But even when you do those things, if you don't find yourself in a favorable situation economically, a lot of people will dismiss you. A lot of people won't respect you, and that, I think, is the major issue I have with this idea. Like, you can work your way out of being an incel, and like I said, if you don't have the means to pay for therapy, it's hard to absolve yourself of the negativity that has developed as a natural reaction to a difficult time in life when you're younger. So anyway, let me just keep going. Let's see. So yeah, so like it says, so yeah, they say you can settle, right? I think that's where I was going. So, I'm willing to settle a little bit, but as I said, part of this is also just because I appreciate my freedom. I appreciate not having to make sacrifices for somebody else. And if I'm going to start making sacrifices for somebody else, then it has to be worth it to me. And what's worth it to me? Well, I'd say at least a 7. I could make sacrifices for a 6, but really a 6 isn't doing it for me. Like, a girl's got to be a 7 before I'm willing to put in the effort and the sacrifices necessary to have a relationship mean anything. And even then, I mean, the sacrifices are huge. Part of the sacrifice is that you become economically viable, and that's not an easy thing. It takes a lot of work, a lot of time, and I suppose it makes you self-reliant, which I suppose is a necessity in the world today. But it also means that you're um, doing something, that, like, I'd like to become self-reliant making music, but I can't. I put the most time into making music, but you can't be self-reliant in music in this day and age unless you're one of the extremely lucky few people. And I didn't really have the talent to get there. Maybe not even the talent or the work ethic. Some people worked harder at it than I did, but I put a lot of time and effort into it, and I'd hoped that I was going to be able to make it. So, all right. So you might say, well, if you're not going to make it with music, then you got to put the time and effort into something else. Okay, fine, right? That's the next logical conclusion. So what else do you do? Well, there's things that you like to do, and there's things that you have to do. If you happen to be good at something that pays, then you can do the thing that you like to do, and that can work out pretty well. But if you're like me and the things that pay are not things that you like to do, which is probably most of these incels out there, then you're sort of trapped doing something that you have to do just because you have to do it and not because you have any real passion for it. And when you pick up a profession like that, um, the reality is you're never going to be that great at it. If you don't love what you do, you're not going to be. You have to love what you do to be good at it. You know, I'm never going to love computer programming. I'm never going to love being a manager. Never going to love business. All the things that pay are not things I love doing. So if you sort of say, okay, so then the next thing you'd say would be, well, if you don't love it, it doesn't matter. You got to do what you got to do to pay the bills. That's all there is to it. Fine. So then, say I go out there, I get a job, it pays the bills. I don't love doing it. I'm not particularly good at it. I never really ascend to a particularly high status doing it. Maybe that's enough for some girls. And it's probably not enough for the best looking girls. If I get that job, in all likelihood, that job that meanwhile takes a ton of effort to get. And a ton of effort really it takes up the majority of your life. The majority of your life doing a job that you don't particularly love, and um, that doesn't bring a lot of fulfillment aside from the paycheck that you get. So you do that job. Since you're not going to be good at it, chances are you're not going to ascend particularly high in social status if you do that job. So what does that mean? It means that you can't expect to get the best looking girls. 8, 9s, and 10s are off the board because most 8, 9s, and 10s don't want a guy who's um, don't want a guy who isn't excelling at what he does or doesn't have show some kind of ability or you know they don't want a guy who's also unfulfilled at work either because that can lead to issues. So all right, you can get a 7 then. Yeah, I think you can get a 7, right? Seven's not a huge settle. If there was a 7 that was interested in me that I got along with, fine. But then there's the question of, well, it's not just a 7 in looks. There's also a lot of other factors to consider. You're not just dealing. You're talking about a long-term relationship. You're not just talking about looks anymore. You're talking about personality. You're talking about the longevity of the relationship. Talking about power dynamics. And will a 7 be happy with you in perpetuity, or will a 7 at some point say, you know what, I can do better because of hypergamy, you know, and because of modern feminism, which tells women that they should expect the best. You know, you wonder if doing those jobs, maybe in the beginning, you can get a girl who's a 7, but you wonder if it'll last. You wonder if the 7 will say, well, here's another guy who really loves what he does, and he's really happy in his life, and he excels at what he does, and people respect him for it. And I've got this guy who's a sad sack. He's always angry. He's always complaining about his job. He's always feeling unfulfilled because he didn't get to do what he wanted to do with his life. You know, you can't even blame the 7 for not wanting to stay with him. And that's what I'm getting at here. Is it's kind of like, in some ways, you have to embrace this person that you really aren't in order to have a relationship. And you wonder if it's even going to bring you fulfillment. You wonder if it's even going to be worth it in the end. Why work your ass off to get a job you don't particularly like and spend most of your life doing that just for the sake of the love of a woman that you have to make sacrifices for and could at any point decide that there's better options out there. There's a lot of pitfalls down that road. So it's all very unattractive, especially for someone like me who doesn't want to have to make a lot of sacrifices and doesn't particularly. I mean, like I said, a 7 is pretty good. If I could find a 7, and I don't just mean a 7 looks wise and a 7 personality wise, the whole deal. That's probably where I'd put I put the art group girl. She's probably like a 7 for me. I don't know. She might be more than that if her personality is great. I don't really know her that well, so it's possible that she's even better than a 7 in reality. Looks wise, she's a 7. She's very pretty, but she doesn't like make my head spin or anything. But she's very pretty. I'd be satisfied with that, I think, except for the fact that I feel like in order to be with that girl, I'd have to work a job that I didn't particularly like, and I'd be spending most of my time doing that job. And there's no guarantee that she would be satisfied with me in that scenario in perpetuity. And even if she was satisfied, let's say you know she's cool in reality. She's good looking enough. She's got a good personality. We get along, and she's satisfied with me. Then the point goes to, well, you know, but I spent all this time not being with anybody. So she's all I'll ever know. And any relationship, after a while, the passion dies, and it's just about the friendship anymore. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that should be enough. But if you've never been with anybody else, you wonder, is that going to be enough? You know, is one girl who, you know, where the passion eventually dies, and I'm assuming the passion dies in most marriages, at some point it becomes more like you know, a friends with a very occasional benefits type of situation. It's not like it was in the beginning. So is that going to be satisfying to me? You know, I'll find myself in a situation where I'm working some job I don't particularly like, and I'm with a woman who is more of a friend than a love interest, and thinking about all those years that I missed out on opportunities. Is that going to be worth it in the end? You know, I don't know. I guess it's hard to expect a lot more than that, but again, it's it's a lot of compromise to be made. You know, and especially when you look at guys who attract women a lot more easily, have had the opportunity to be with a lot more women, and without feeling like there was anything that they did to deserve that. Um, you know, pro athletes, they get to be with eights, nines, and tens because more, and that has something to do with their work ethic, but it has more to do with their talent. They're born with this incredible talent that if you're a pro athlete, you have, you know, some of the rarest talent in the world. You have to cultivate it, but so much of that is just genetic. How is it fair that they can date any number of eights, nines, and tens, and then settle down with a 10, and have the family and be rich and that whole deal, doing something that they love doing? They get it all. You know, they get it all. It's not fair. You know, and I think that's the problem with being a 7 and dealing with doing a job you don't particularly like and settling down and watching the passion fade and sort of settling for that life is you sort of feel like, well, you know, it's sort of like, well, you had to put in all this extra effort for much less than what the other guy got. And you could be lucky. Maybe the person's your soulmate. It's not impossible that the person will be your soulmate and that it'll be worth it in the end. The relationship will be worth it in the end. But to bank on that seems, you know, seems like you're ever going to have a low rate of success. Because how many people really find their soulmate? It's got to be a vanishingly small percentage of people that end up with getting married. We already know that half of the marriages end in divorce. Then some other percentage of marriages are unhappy marriages that only stay together for the sake of convenience or the sake of apathy or for other reasons that don't make a lot of sense. So it's a lot of investment. It's a lot of investment to make, and it's a hard investment to make when it starts with you trying to get your mind right and change the way you've been living for most of your life. I think people just underestimate the difficulty when they talk about getting your shit together. Well, I think if you do it when you're young, your chances of success are better. But if you're like me, you're wondering at what the payoff is going to be at this point. You're wondering if it could ever live up to the amount of work that it would require to get there, and you also wonder whether it's worth um, living an unfulfilled life because regardless of whether or not you get a relationship to work, if you're not doing something you love for your job, then life is unfulfilling. And you also got to wonder if it's fair to expose a potential future partner to that disappointment. You know. Anyway, let me just finish reading this. So yeah, let's see. Blah, 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 blah. So yeah, then this is on the other side of it. Now we'll go to the next part. Women don't find the Chad tall, high income, committed to her because Chad could have any woman he wants. Most of the guys that are tall, make a lot of money, or at least have high social status, and are not guys that are going to remain committed to women. And if they are those guys, as it says, they'll usually find them younger. Doesn't happen later in life as often. Um, Feminism has taught women that they can have it all, be promiscuous like men, and chase the best-looking guys, and never settle for anything less. This is one of the things I agree with that. I think feminism has raised women's expectations to be very high. Um, maybe I would, for a lot of women, it probably is beyond what they should be. But I can't judge women for having high expectations because I have high expectations myself. She could understand that Chad only exists on Instagram, so that's not 100% true because there are, like I said, good guys who are sort of Chad types that when they're young. But yeah, maybe when they get past a certain age, Chad only exists on Instagram. Even a lot of young guys with options will still keep playing the field and not commit. That most men aren't tall enough, don't make over six figures, and that she's not as good looking as she thinks, and maybe should find a nice man who's agreeable and willing to let her and be willing to treat her with respect and build a life with. I think part of the problem with that is women aren't really looking for agreeable guys a lot of the time. They want a guy who's a challenge. So while it says that, and I do believe that if women was interested in building a life rather than catching a top guy, that she would be more concerned with agreeableness and loyalty. But just like guys like me don't think it's worth the sacrifices unless you're dating a girl who's a certain level of attractiveness. These girls don't feel like it's worth the sacrifices you make in a relationship unless the guy has a certain social status and it's not even really all entirely about social status, but a certain ability to, I guess, be fulfilled in his work in some way or another, and get paid enough that he isn't a financial burden to her. That's really the key. It's not so much about high status, but it's about making enough money that you will never be a burden to the other person. And these days, it's harder than ever to get there. In order to make enough money to not be a burden, you're talking about making a minimum 70 grand. 70 grand is like the minimum of what you need to not, start to strain the lifestyle of your partner in the modern world. And I don't know, for me personally, 70 grand is going to require working a job that I find unfulfilling, but that requires me to focus on it. And that's a tough bridge for me to cross. Um, so society ends up with bitter, angry men and who is correct to a certain degree about how things work and about his own circumstances. He can change it by investing in himself, getting a job, and having something of value to offer a woman, then going out and trying again. I already went over this. When you when you do this, you end up mostly unfulfilled if you're someone like me who's an artistic type. You know, I could do this, but it's not going to make me happy with my life. It might give me a better chance with women, but it's not going to make me feel fulfilled with what I have to do 40 hours a week in order to live sustainably, independently. You also end up with bitter, alone women who sleep around, have children out of wedlock, and chase men till they hit the wall. They're no longer. This isn't all women. This is a bit of. Some of this stuff is an overgeneralization, but there's nuggets of truth in everything he says. There are some women who do this. I think most women, in the end, by the time they get to be, if they haven't found a guy, there are girls that meet the loyal Chad types when they're younger. It's usually when they're younger. If they haven't met a guy who's kind of a upper level guy when they're young, it does get harder when they get older. Um, and I think modern feminism is suggesting that women should be more promiscuous and act like guys and not settle down. And I think you women take a risk when they do that, you know, because a lot of guys will judge a woman for having been around slept around with a lot of other guys. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But you know, certainly as a guy myself, I'll say that, you know, as a guy who lacks experience myself, I don't want a woman who's been around a lot because you kind of wonder, you know that they've had a kaleidoscope of experiences that you've missed out on, and it can lead to jealousy, wishing that you had had the same opportunities, and you know, wondering what your partner knows that you don't know, and just feeling envious that you didn't get to experience some of those things yourself. So that's my issue with women sleeping around. It's not so much because I feel like they get used up or anything like that, but it feels like they'd be more likely to take you for granted because of other things that they've seen before, Whereas if I only have one partner, that's all I'll know. So they'll be my everything. But I can never be their everything because they've been through so many other men before, that it probably, the relationship won't be as special to them as it would be to me. And it makes you kind of perpetually vulnerable in a relationship. And, you might end up acting in a way that's more insecure because of that. And, women would say, well, that's just stupid to be insecure, but it's easy to say that, but it's not so easy to live it. I think if you were put in that situation yourself, you wouldn't feel quite the same. But anyway. Okay, so yeah. And it is true that if a woman doesn't find a man by the time she's 40, it does get harder to find men that are going to be interested. I mean, it's not impossible, but it gets harder. That at 40, I think, is the wall they're talking about. He's talking about. You can try to shame men for not being attracted to older women, but the reality of the matter is both men and women, when we get to be 40, we lose a lot. I look back at pictures of myself in my 20s and 30s and think, yeah, I was a good-looking guy back then. Now I'm not on that level anymore. It doesn't surprise me that women would be less interested in me now than they were in the past. And the same thing goes for women. We can try to pretend like like you deserve as much to be as attractive when you're in your 40s as you were when you're 20s and 30s, but we're just not. That's just not reality. That's not how biology works. We're our best looking when we're in our physical prime, and it all goes downhill from there. And 40 years old is an age at which, I think for most guys it's older than 40. I think most guys kind of are into women until they're closer to 50. I think when you get closer to 50, you really take a sharper turn downhill. But for me, I lose a lot of interest, you know, not a lot long into the 40s. I never thought when I was younger that I'd ever find women over 40 attractive, and now that I'm getting older, I'm finding some women in their 40s more attractive than I probably would have thought. But, the thing that's tough about that is you could be attracted to them in their early 40s and they still look all right, but you know that that's only going to shorten your window of the romance window. When I was younger, I had a woman who was 27 who, you know, expressed interest in me, and she approached me in a bar and we talked and things like that. And some part of me, didn't want to be with her because she was 27. I was 23, I think, at the time. And I thought, well, I'm going to be missing out on some good years. I'd really have a girl who was closer to my age, So then, I didn't realize that 27 is really young at the time. So that was a stupid attitude. She was so pretty at 27 that really I would have had plenty of years to be with her. But when you start talking about women who are in their 40s, it's like, well, they're going to go downhill fairly quickly after the relationship starts. So if you're already guaranteed to have a hard time maintaining the passion, it only gets harder when you're starting when both of you are older. And I think it goes both ways. I wonder why, a younger woman would really. It's no surprise younger women aren't attracted to older men because the same thing goes. Suddenly you've got a guy who's in his 50s and out of touch and not energetic and you know I don't expect a young woman to be attracted to an older man. For some reason, it goes that way more for whatever reason. Maybe because sometimes they say you're attracted to what your father is, and sometimes women have older fathers. But I don't know. That's the Freudian thing. Um, but all I'm saying is that I think 40 is an age at which most men, at least the majority of men, are not as interested. And same thing with women. I think 40 is the age at which most women become less interested too, at least when they're younger. Let's see. I think the reason why men who are in their 40s do better than women in their 40s is because, as mentioned before, a lot of women do care about social status and and your ability to make money. And so there are a lot of men in their 40s who are doing really well in their careers, and so that makes up for the fact that they're objectively not as attractive, but they still remain some of their attractiveness just because of their abilities and their having developed abilities and their social status. Women don't get the same bump that men do, because men don't really care if women have achieved great things. You could say we're shallow because of that, and maybe you're right, but it's just the reality. We're not as attracted by a woman's accomplishments as we are by her looks. Women are much more the amount of your abilities and your status play much more into women's choices of mate than they do into male choices of mate. And I think that you can claim that that's because of some shallowness that men have, but I think it's mostly in men's biology. But anyway, let's see. So let's see. The good men have something to offer already taken. They got married earlier and have started their families. The men left over are either high value men who can keep their options open, and who women are perpetually throwing themselves at, a small percentage of the male population. This is very true. And another thing that we find it difficult to settle when you've got these guys who are very good at their jobs. They're very fulfilled in what they do, and they may not be doing anything that is particularly something we agree with, but they are good at it and they enjoy it. And I think that's, like I said, with modern feminism telling women that they should have everything, increasingly, you know, and with modern feminism telling women that it's okay to sleep around the way men do, then you end up having a lot of these, high status guys having all the options in the world and the rest of us having to settle. And a lot of us just don't think that the high status guys deserve, those women any more than we do. We feel like we're good people. We feel like we have other things to offer besides what capitalism considers valuable. But these women disagree. Most women, for the most part, you know, will agree with society's judgment of us and not think outside the box or recognize those qualities in us that make us attractive for other reasons, or at least on the surface. Or maybe they do and they just can't discern them because they don't know us well enough. And it's hard to get into a situation where a woman is capable of discerning your deeper qualities, the things that might make you attractive. Most attraction in the beginning is superficial, so it's hard to get to that point, where women have an opportunity to see the things about you that make you attractive that aren't those things deemed by the propaganda of society that make you a catch. Anyway, let's see. And so yeah, the men left over are either high value men who keep their options open to women are perpetually throwing themselves at a small percentage of the male population, or who are men women won't settle for. It's not working out real well for anyone. Both sexes end up not getting what they desire. Why? Unrealistic expectations and unwilling to settle and commit the hard work of building a real life together, not an Instagram life that is fake and doesn't exist. So I did make this video um, about how we could save humanity or save the human race by settling, and it was you can go back and watch it. I think it's sound logic, but you know over time I've come to realize that in practice it just doesn't really work that well because nobody really wants to settle because and like I said the reasons for that is because a relationship is a sacrifice. When you make a sacrifice like that, you want to make sure you're getting value for your sacrifice. And I think that's the bottom line is that, I think that's the real issue, just to sum this up. That's why incels, don't try. That's why they don't do the things that are prescribed because we know that, and I think this is true in the world in general, you know, you have to put a lot out. I had my former CEO of the company I worked for said this, and I really believe it's true. In life, you put a lot of effort out, and what you get back is not really commensurate with the effort you put in. It's not like an equal thing. You put out this much effort, and you usually get about this much back. It could be anywhere from you. I mean, you're not even guaranteed this. You put in this at the very top of the screen here. Most people, I'd say, get this. Some people get this. Some people get screwed and they put this much effort in, and just due to a combination of bad luck um, or maybe a lack of talent or not being in the right place at the right time, which I guess goes under bad luck. But all I'm saying is, you know, you're never guaranteed. You know, you're never guaranteed the effort you put in. You're always getting less than what you put in, and it's tough when especially when, like I said, unless you are putting in the effort towards something that you enjoy doing, something that gives your life fulfillment and that you feel like you can excel at. If you're forced into putting the effort into something that you're not particularly good at and aren't going to enjoy, you know, then you're not going to be putting in this effort for one, because this is usually reserved for those people that love their jobs, and are passionate. The rest of us, if we can't do what we want, you know, I can't do I can't do this with music and expect to get enough out of it to survive. So I have to take the practical job and put this much in. Well, what does that mean? The best I can expect, at best, is this. And now, what part of the screen are we in? We're below the halfway point. You see what I'm saying here? You know, this is the best I can expect. Now, all right, you could say, well, you don't put any effort in at all. You know, where you end up, all the way down here. You're not gonna get anything if you don't put any effort in, right? Well, I'm an all or nothing kind of guy. Why even put in this much effort if the best you're gonna get is glass half empty? You know, sorry, glass less than half empty. This is an important distinction to make. You know, it's not even a matter of saying that this is glass half empty. You could say, oh well, this is this, this is this is either there's no way of making this. This is never going to be more than a third of the screen. This is the best you can get, and that's if everything goes right. If you put out this effort and you get this back, that's only if everything goes right. You could easily put out, like I said, you can put out this effort and get this. You get the same thing. You put out this effort, you could still get this. Whereas you could also put out no effort and you'll get this again. It's always down here. That's the point I'm making. Is it's like there's no guarantees. Nothing's guaranteed. And if you're like me and you're an all or nothing guy, and I think some amount of all or nothing thinking comes from. I do think some amount of all or nothing thinking comes from the trauma and the negativity that we've experienced. So it's hard to pull yourself out of that idea. It's hard for me to even put this. This is my goal now. My goal is to put this effort out, and that's a hard goal to commit to. It's a hard goal to commit to, knowing that the best you're going to get out of this is this. That's the best. And I think that's where most incels are at. And we look at the guys that either have talent or you know or just didn't have the bad experiences we did. Don't have to go through the same therapy that we have to. Live charmed lives. You know, maybe they're not getting this. Some of them are getting this. Some of them put out this and get this. If they're really lucky. Those are the very, very lucky few. Most of them are at least up here. And we look at them and think, why do they deserve that? Why don't they have to go through the therapy? You know, why don't they have to overcome all this BS? You know, and it's hard to be excited about doing having to start here and and feel like this was worthwhile over this. It's something, but it's not enough to get excited about. That's all I'm saying. I feel like, to be motivated to do something, you gotta, this motivates people. This, that's not much of a motivation. So I guess that's what it comes down to. And especially if you're like someone like me, or somebody who maybe due to trauma has an all or nothing perfectionist kind of attitude on life. You know, where's the motivation? I've said this in other videos. There's not a lot of motivation. So that's why incels are the way they are. I'm not really a classic incel. I don't take part in these incel groups, and I don't hate women the way they do. But I just think people have a lot of easy answers for incels that comes from a place of you know not having walked in our shoes. And if you had any idea of what it was like to go through what we've been through, you know, you'd probably be just as negative as I'm being right now. You know, you like to think that people like to think that they're just better. They just like to thumb their nose at these people. It's like, well, these people, they don't get it. And they feel bad for us, and we were like this Jordy Greep guy. He makes us into this. He sort of, he's. I guess I don't know if he's making fun of us or I think he said something about how he feels some amount of empathy for us, but or sympathy, I guess. Maybe not empathy, but sympathy. But your sympathy doesn't make our lives any better. And I don't really understand why this guy felt the need to make this movie, or make this album, you know. Why he felt the need to call out guys like me, you know. It feels like you're punching down, if you ask me. I think he did it because you know, he knows that women would like it, because we're reviled, and I think he's mostly interested in. One reason he probably did it, Jordy Greep, is because he wanted to separate himself from himself. He wanted to, like I've said, some people do things. Some people do things because some people pick on the little guy because it makes them feel big. I don't know why this guy felt the need to. He seems like he has a successful career. He's doing fine. But I guess he thought, let me punch down a little bit, prop myself up a little bit. That's part of why he made this. He likes to claim he has sympathy for us, but I don't think he has any effing idea what it feels like to be. You know, he might have some idea. Maybe he got past it. Maybe in his early days as a musician, he thought the way we did, and then he was lucky enough to have success, and maybe he worked harder. Maybe he had more talent. Um, he found the right combination of talent and hard work to get him where he needed to go. And not just talent and hard work, but also, maybe he had supportive family environment growing up. Maybe he had rich parents. It's possible.
A lot of musicians these days have rich parents. I didn't look into his background. Um, Maybe he had a strong mentor or social circle, or maybe he didn't deal with the same types of trauma that we did growing up. I have a hard time seeing him how he would become. Some musicians do become successful even in spite of the trauma, but they usually have so much talent that it just can't be denied. I don't know if this guy's not. I don't love him that much as an instrumentalist, to think that, or as a songwriter, to think that he had so much talent that he was going to make it no matter what. I think he had some favorable circumstances, is my guess, but I don't know. I'll have to look into his background. But I think he did it as a way to prop himself up on the backs of weaker people, number one. And number two, because I think he knew girls would like it, because girls generally don't like types like me. And, I think he puts himself in a favorable light by saying, look at these trashy, women hating guys, let me just take the piss out of them, it'll be funny, and and people will talk about how how woke I am, how how much I support women, and it'll get me laid a lot. That's my guess. I mean, he's already getting laid a lot, but I guess you can never boost your own image too much. So yeah, I guess the majority group, I'd say, don't judge a man until you walk a mile, 10,000 miles in his shoes or whatever. I don't know what. I think it's the mile. I don't know where I got 10,000. Don't judge a man until you've walked a mile in his shoes. You're not that great of a musician, honestly. I don't get the hype. People calling this one of the best albums of the year. There's another album out there that is one of the best albums of the year. I'll just plug them real quick at the end here. It's totally off topic, but this band Magdalena Bay. These people are real musicians. They're not just doing things for. What they're doing is Magdalena Bay. What they're doing is new. It's kind of retro in a way, but it's also new. It's like making new of the old, which is an interesting way of going about it. It draws on it takes stuff that existed in the past and reimagines it in a way that has never been done before. So I like this band Magdalena Bay. This new album, Imaginal Disc, is very creative. I sent them an email today praising them. That's real talent there. These kids got talent. I don't know. Maybe I'm just biased because I like the style, and they've combined synth pop and prog. Two of my favorite genres currently, so it's no wonder that I love them. But I think that they're really talented. So yeah, I'll plug them. But Jordy Greep, you think very highly of yourself. You might be a very skilled musician, but you're not an innovator, and I think most people find your music to be generally off-putting because it's like all this kind of like jazz has been done. So what is it? You're jazz with like a bunch of like dramatic yelling and stuff over the top, or I don't know. I don't hear it. I personally don't think it's a great album. Some people are really into it, so whatever. To each his own. I don't think he represents anything really revolutionary at all. And I think you should freaking you know. I don't think you should judge people until you know. Just don't take the shit out of people unless you're ready to have the shit taken out of you. That's what I try to do at the end here a little bit. So yeah, go fuck yourself.